I would like to introduce Mahesh Chetanandani, who will be moderating a panel, Automate or Stagnate, the New Network Reality. Mahesh is a distinguished engineer at Arcus and the Area Director of Management and Operations in IETF. While he has given talks at NANOG before around management, this is his first time conducting a fireside chat. He has traveled from San Jose, California, to join us today. Mahesh, please introduce your panelists. Thank you.
Hi. Thanks, Jeffrey, for that generous introduction. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this panel discussion. Before we get started, let me have each of the panelists introduce themselves, starting with Jerome.
Hey, I'm Jerome Fleury. I'm the Vice President of Network and Traffic Engineering at Cloudflare. I've been in this business for like, I don't know, 20 years plus. And especially at Cloudflare, I've been there for 12 years, so I'm pretty much from the beginning. And we've started our automation journey like more than 10 years ago now. Yeah.
All right, Nico.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Nico Strina. I'm currently working for Equinix, based in the Bay Area. Also in the business for quite a while. Worked for different companies, including Twitch and some other companies in Europe. And in the game for automation, also, it's a long journey, so I guess it's going to continue for a while. So nice to be here.
My name's Chris. I also have gray hair. And I started working on networks from a software perspective, and so seeing things come kind of back around to network automation and using software to build networks is very interesting to me, and I'm excited to dig in here.
All right. I have gray hair too, but I got rid of them, so you don't see them.
Well.
Chris, let's get started with you. You've been spearheading the effort to get network operators to adopt automation as part of NAF. What are some of the common issues or concerns that you have seen evolve in and outside of AutoCon?
Yeah. So through the Network Automation Forum, also through some of the consulting I do and a survey that I've done, this is the third year, right after lunch, I'll present some results on the survey. And the thing that really strikes me about what's, I think, standing in the way of broader network automation adoption is that the problem isn't technical. We have the tools, right? We have the technology. Like we can rebuild them. We can do this. And a lot of things that get in the way are more personal and more cultural and more organizational, right? So, I mean, there's a skills thing there, but that's pretty surmountable, right? I mean, I think most of us got into network engineering or IT in general because we like to learn and we like to try new technologies and things. Not everyone, I guess. There are some people who complain about things changing, but in general, we can learn new skills, and that's not an unsurmountable problem. But there are some things we've tied ourselves into this identity of like being a great network engineer is how fast you can bang stuff into the CLI, right? We've built tests for this. Mm-hmm. We give you 8 hours and you have to build a network, and then we're going to break it when you go to lunch and you come back and you fix it, right? And that's the top level certification, and it's great, but it definitely has led to people kind of associating being good with networks to being good on a CLI. And that becomes an identity crisis where when you take that away, people are like, oh, wait a minute, like if I don't have my show commands, like who am I?
Yeah.
Which gets in the way. And then there's organizational things too, which is just, how you organize teams, how you put people together. This idea that we seem to be thinking of, the network engineer who used to be able to do everything, we want him to still do everything, but now we expect her to, everything includes writing Python and doing software development, and these are just different things. So I think there's some organizational culture issues, I think there's some personality issues, and I think there's some organizational structure issues that are the biggest ones. Yeah.
All right, so we'll get into some of those cultural issues. So Nico, You've been a big proponent of automation. What was your motivation to see this effort through? And what advice would you have for folks who are just starting out?
That's a very good question. I think that the motivation was to just ensure that we keep some consistency, generally speaking. And when we speak about consistency, that consistency in the way we are serving customers, because I think that at the end of the day, that's the most important. And also like the way we serve operations, because we need to ensure that we can scale, we can repeat, and we can make things as stable as possible. Because I mean, as you say, like the people start like thinking that CLI is the go-to things like went like a while back, and I think that what we are trying to do today is to make sure that we don't have like errors or things that could cost a lot of money to companies, right? I mean, if there is an outage and things like that. Now, the things that I would say that people should maybe look into is that when you start doing automation is like making sure that you have like the right set of data, because I think that most of the things that we will do in terms of automation is going to sit on actual data. And then start looking at what the user journey is looking like, because often when we are building something else, the idea is to be sure that we are pinpointing the right thing to build. And I would say just validate your assumption and then start building step-by-step things that are going to save you time or save you whatever things that you may be interested into, because each organization is going to have their own problems. And I think that this is, while we all have similar use cases at the end of the day, there is a bunch of things that are proper to each organization. And I think that's what I would do. And then once you start like iterating on your things, it's okay to be scrappy at the beginning when you learn, and then start iterating step by step up to the point where you're going to start solving real problems. And of course, always making sure that we can measure what we do, right? I mean, at the end of the day, if you look at, I don't know, like time to resolve incidents or time of mitigating like a function of some sort. And I think that's what I would like, I mean, as an advice, probably start looking at this way. And then the last thing that I wanted to say is that often we build and we build and we build and we build, and then we don't really look at the tech debt. I think that it's important to assess, especially in software development, starting assessing often, am I building the right thing? Am I having the right framework? And start building around that. Mm-hmm. And then go with the flow, because like as soon as you start proving your point and start showing results, people are going to ask you for more. Yeah. And I think that don't be afraid of asking questions, because it's hard. I mean, let's be clear, the technology is evolving at a pace that's crazy. And I think that's kind of where I would be sitting this morning.
Jerome, I have the same question to you.
Can you rephrase the question?
Yeah, so the question was, if someone is starting out their effort towards automation, what would your advice be for them?
Yeah, my advice would be that you need to understand what problem you're trying to solve with network automation. I often tell my folks, like, not everything needs to be automated, at least right now. Like you can try to achieve 100% coverage of your network automation, but like what exact problem are you trying to solve? In the case of Cloudflare, when we started, the problem was pretty clear for us. Like we're coming from a scrappy startup trying to survive, you know, and so we had an ambitious management, and we had 20 POPs at the time, 20 locations around the world, and they said, oh, we're going to go to 100. Oh, and by the way, you're not getting more employees to do that. So we had literally no choice. We would have been swamped under the workload if we didn't introduce network automation in there. And what problem were we trying to solve? We were not trying to solve the provisioning issue. We had no problem provisioning 100 POPs manually if needed be. That's definitely wasn't the challenge. The challenge was daily operations and the amount of traffic engineering that we had to do manually on the routers to prevent outages on the internet. You know, there's always something broken on the internet at any point in time. So we're like literally taking dozens, if not hundreds of actions per day to mitigate outages on the internet. So we had to automate that part. So that's where we started. We created a framework that would allow us to automatically adjust routing policies. And that was the problem statement. And we started from there. And once you have a success story with something you really needed to fix with automation, after that, there's a flywheel effect. Everything comes into place, and you'll be in the right spot. Just don't do network automation for the sake of network automation.
That's a good lesson. So let's move into the area of monetization and business advantage. And Nico, what are some of the reasons you can think of for why management in any organization would like to support the efforts towards network automation? Is it cost, or are there other reasons?
I mean, for sure, cost is going to be something else. Like, we're all interested into controlling, right? I mean, you don't want to expand indefinitely, on things that you can maybe simplify. I would say that stability is one of the first things and scalability, pace of development. I would say time to market, because at the end of the day, if we look at where we are sitting today from an industry perspective, lots of things it's on software. More and more. The network is still here and will always be here to a certain degree, but people build fast, and the fast is in networking can be very long, right? So the idea behind all that, in my opinion, is that's what the motivation is, and also being innovative, right? If we look at all the things that we are all trying to compete to a certain degree, and if you have good ideas, I think that's what, if we can iterate fast on those ideas and start being, as I said, time to market while controlling the network, controlling the way we are building and scaling and deploying, I think that's what makes it very interesting. Now we need to be very cautious, when we speak about cost, because sometimes the cost of engineering can also be pretty crazy. And that's why, I appreciate what you're saying, Jerome, which is making sure that we target what we're building, and it's because it's fun to build stuff, right? I mean, we are all, I think, agreeing on that. But at the end, it has to be meeting also company goals and targets and things like that. So I would say that it's a combination of lots of different things, but in the era where we are, I don't think it's a luxury. I think it's a necessity at that point.
So Jerome, you have seen some spectacular growth in Cloudflare over the recent past. Do you see automation enabling growth for an organization, or impacting it?
Yes, 100%. Yeah. As I said, in our case, how do you scale from a network of 20 locations to, I think today we're at 400 or something. In the case of network deployments, that growth wouldn't have been possible without network automation. There's no way the company would have kept the margins of operations if we hadn't implemented that. Interestingly, I think the next phase of growth at Cloudflare, it's not so much about the scale of deployment. It's about it's a lot about compliance today. I just realized recently that a lot of my network automation is for compliance reasons, because you're growing, and the customers that are coming to us now, they require a lot of stuff: PCI, SOC 2, FedRAMP High, which is even harder. And the only way we can achieve that on the network today, if you look at the requirements for FedRAMP High, they're kind of crazy. Sometimes you may be asked to upgrade your entire fleet of routers in 15 days. How do you do that when you have 400 locations? I mean, the FedRAMP scope usually is US only, but let's say you have 100 routers with all your production traffic to upgrade in 15 days. How do you do that? And the only way we can do it today with network automation. So the requirements for network automation for us have changed. It went from traffic engineering mostly, then it went to provisioning, and now it's really on the compliance part of the problem. So I think at each stage of growth, you will adapt your network automation to new requirements.
Excellent. Chris, for an executive who's still skeptical, how do you quantitatively connect network automation to shareholder value or a positive impact on their P&L statement? What's the best financial metric to track the success of their automation efforts?
Yeah, I don't know if I have one financial metric that's the best to track. I think both Jerome and Nico have talked a little bit around this. I think time to market is a big part of this, right? If there's any part of your business that's reliant on network services, being able to deliver what you're delivering. So if you're delivering service or services, software or services in any way, there's a very good chance that being able to move network tickets faster will actually speed up your business, which does have an impact on the bottom line. I think the compliance side of it is really big. I think being able to, whatever it is, if you've got the right automation in place and you're using, kind of design first and documentation is built into the automation system, you can just pull a report to your SOC compliance is now just like you hit a button and from the network side anyway, here's the answers.
Right.
I don't have to actually go do any auditing. I just know what's going on in my network, which is a big deal. I think a lot of this stuff ties back to cost in some ways, but I think it's also a little bit of looking at the cost, the money you're already spending, getting more out of it, right? So I don't know that you're going to be able to, in most organizations, you're not going to deploy automation and like lay off people. It's probably not a real thing. However, you can actually have the people who are working for you be able to keep up with what you're asking them to do, which changes a lot of things.
Yeah.
Really, really in a big way. So those are a number of the things. I think in general, honestly, there's kind of two ways to look at it. I think at some level, you need to look at your company, your organization as an executive and say, okay, like, is the network crucial to the business I'm doing? If so, then there's a number of things that need to happen. One of them is automation. And now there's a lot of things that need to happen in order to get to automation, right? Data quality is a big part of this, right? Understanding what the network actually looks like. I mean, I don't know about you all, but most networks I walk into, getting an up-to-date network diagram is an impossible task for some reason at almost every organization I've ever worked with. Now somebody can draw one, right? Maybe, but like having one like that, so there's a number of things that need to lead up to automation, and those things are necessary if the network is a critical part of your business. Now, there is another possible answer. Maybe the network's not a critical part of your business. Maybe this is just a utility. Maybe all I need is for people to be able to get online and be on Salesforce, and I don't really care about the network at all. Well, then maybe you should be using something like Meter or Ramen, right? Maybe you should just go to a NAS provider who's just going to come in, somebody who actually cares about the network, let them build and run the network for you. So I think that's the split, right? It's not that everyone needs to be building out their own software development team to build network automation. Is the network critical to your business or not? If it is, then invest in networking. If it's not, pay someone who does.
All right. So moving into some of the cultural issues that you brought up, Chris, the question back to you is that it has been observed to move towards automation, you have to marry the role of a network engineer and a software engineer. And that's a unique and a challenging role to hire into. What is the advice for a fresh graduate on what to pursue and how to go about getting those skills?
Yes. So as a fresh graduate, that's a whole. I mean, be an electrician probably or a plumber at this point. Honestly, like I don't know what the future of intellectual work is at this point. But more seriously on the automation scale, I think that what we need to do as organizations is not try to hunt unicorns, right? I don't think that what you need is a person who is a systems engineer and a software developer and a network engineer in an individual person. I think what we need to do is build the right teams. And I think what you need to do, so I think from the individual perspective, I'm giving advice to an individual, pursue whichever one of those things makes sense to you, right? What is your passion? What speaks to you? And then hopefully rely on the fact that, any good manager is going to be building a team that puts together the pieces that are needed, right?
Right.
You need these cross-functional teams that can own a service end to end, network services included, just like we build software. Like this is how it needs to be built. And that team needs to be made up of the person who can run Linux and the other person who can run Kubernetes and the other person who can, speak BGP and the other person who can write, Java or Python or whatever it is. That is not a single individual, I don't think. I mean, and if you are, great, like charge a lot of money, like just get paid, but don't expect that to be you and don't expect to hire that person either.
Okay. Nico and Jerome, the same question to you, but really for more experienced folks, people who have been working in their silos for years. What advice would you have for them coming into a role of an automation engineer? Nico, maybe why don't you go first?
I would say that the first thing is just to be open to change. I mean, like it's things are not going to go backward, right? I mean, things are changing. It's going to continue changing. I think it's being open to also challenge the things we are doing for a long time. I mean, I call it the syndrome of, like we already do that for a long time, and like it's often the things you can hear in organizations. And I think that like being just open to ask questions, because it's hard. Like if you're very senior and going back to asking questions that are going to make you start from the beginning can be a bit challenging. And I think that going against that fear is good, but I would say to experiment also as well and start educating people on the benefit of doing like automation, for instance, on like moving away from doing full, let's say, operational work, or like sitting behind your keyboard all day long typing BGP sessions or things like that, to let's automate the BGP sessions so you can work on traffic engineering, for instance, and trying to bring people to see the like what's next somehow, because I think that the fear of change is also coming to the unknown. Like as you said, like we don't know what's tomorrow, but like I think this is key, like in bringing people together, and after there is always like offering the possibility for people to scale. Like I mean, in a sense of skill sets, meaning that I mean trainings is always an option. Helping people to step up, going from not doing software to doing software can be tricky. Like and not everyone else is looking in that direction. So I think there is like a few things also from a management perspective, as you were mentioning, that's very important. Is like you need to build a trust and make sure that people understand that not knowing is okay. Right. Because at the end, there is always a moment where you don't know. Like, I mean, I would be pretentious to think that everyone knows everything. So I think that like that's the role also of the leadership to show that there is like a way to shift. By personal experience, that's something else that show very good results. And we see people that are like finding their new way. And as you were mentioning, like on the team, if we look at a strike team or service team or things like that, people, like it's finding your own place in your own organization. And I think that this is what I would do as a leader, is making sure that we give that opportunity to people, because at the end of the day, if you want people to succeed, you need to take the time to bring them to the other level. So that's kind of my thoughts.
Jerome, your thoughts?
I would say that whether you are an experienced network engineer or a freshman, I mean, it doesn't really matter today. There's no escape to merging the worlds of network engineering and software engineering. The most successful folks in my organization are the ones who embrace that and are not scared to try new things. And usually it's kind of complicated because we live in a world where network engineers, like if you look at how do you configure BGP today, it's pretty much the same as how you configured BGP 20 years ago. We live in a pretty much static world here. And when you have to adapt to the software engineering world, which is completely different, like things are changing every month. You have a new framework for this, a new framework for that. So like my folks right now are moving from Apache Airflow to Temporal for orchestration, and we just deployed Airflow. It just started, and now they have to switch to something else. Oh, and they also have to migrate from Git Atlassian to GitLab. You know, and there's always something happening. There's always a new way to do things. There's no choice. You have to embrace that. It's not to say that the pure network engineering skills are not necessary anymore. Like they're equally important. But if you don't understand how to programmatically do your job, certainly you have a problem in the industry today. Yeah.
So Chris, tooling has been talked about in the context of automation, whether it's tools for end developers, libraries that support automation, or even samples of code. What role do you see NAF playing to enable automation programmability?
Yeah, so I mean, the idea of NAF is to bring people together to talk about network automation, right? So the idea is to be the forum, the watering hole, the water cooler, whatever you want to call it, where people can come and talk about these things. And I think just like Nanog does, you bring people who are actually building these things together and let them talk about what works and what doesn't, and the industry advances, right? That's a big part of it. I think, like everybody, I think in some cases, you see a glaring hole and we want to fill it. One of the things that's just happened pretty recently within the Network Automation Forum is a group of folks in the community have put together a network automation framework, right? Which is just really boiling down the basic structure of what network automation looks like and what the different components are. And then what happens with that is then once you have something like that, and it can also be wrong, right? Like whether it's right or wrong, you put these boxes down on a piece of paper and you can start to fit the tools into these things and say, okay, well, like these two tools actually overlap, based on this framework. And you can start to compare and contrast, and then you can see, okay, well, wait a minute, like no one's building a tool that fits this piece right here, right? Whatever that is, right? Tying these two pieces together or creating the orchestration for this piece. And you can start to really kind of look at your stack of tools, your tool chain, whether it's what's available in the industry or what you're actually using inside of your organization, and start to figure out where those holes are, where those gaps are, what needs to be built and what doesn't. So I think that's a big part of, again, what NAP is doing, and I think what we all need to do in general is continue to have these conversations and really take a hard look at what this, it doesn't have to be standardized, right? Like it's never going to be standardized, but at least have like a common language to talk about these things.
Sure.
And understand, which pieces are needed and what that stack kind of looks like. And again, a lot of that just comes from talking, from comparing notes. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And you can kind of share how that works, right? Are you using Terraform? Are you using Ansible? Are you using Norner? Right, as one piece of this, and start to kind of understand where those gaps are, where the special sauce is for each individual organization. Yeah.
Well, those are good hints. Jerome, would you suggest a large development team in-house, or do you see this effort being contracted out? In other words, do you see development of network automation?
There's no way we can contract this out. It's just like, it's so core to your business that I think there's no chance that any contractor will understand everything you need to build. And the big part of network automation is that there is a high cost of maintaining it working, very high cost. So you need to understand that. So first you need to hire multiple people. I did that mistake initially 10 years ago when we started. Like I had a fantastic engineer who managed the entire pipeline. He built it from scratch with Salt. Created everything, maintaining it, and creating the function for automation and everything. And the day that guy left, it was an absolute nightmare. It took us a year to get back to the velocity that we had before. So really, like, build a team, multiple people team. That's definitely a core requirement. In-house, because usually what you are going to build, like you can't build that in a silo. You have to connect to the rest of the tools of your company, whether it's the source of truth, the asset management tooling, whether it's the Git server, whether it's the CI/CD pipeline. Don't reinvent everything, like that's what we do a lot at Cloudflare, is that we reuse what's available to us. That's why we started with Salt initially. It's because that was the system used by the entire company to manage servers. And I was like, well, we're not going to use something else. We're just going to start from scratch with Salt. Whether it's a success or not, we can debate, but it works. But there's a high cost of maintenance, especially when you grow. Maintaining a pipeline for network automation for 100 devices is definitely not the same as for thousands of devices. There is a scaling function that will take a lot of your time, and a reliability function on it. It's, you start seeing drift after a certain number of devices, where some devices, for some reason, are not properly collected, or they lose the management function. There are like config drifts that you can't always explain. And it's really due to the number of exceptions and anything that happens on the internet. So it's a full-time job. You need a full-time dedicated team to do that. And even for a lot of them, it's okay if they're not network engineers and they don't understand it. You still need a few folks that really understand why we're doing it and how it connects to the network engineering world and the internet, if you're an internet company. But it's not a strong requirement. Like you can find software engineers who can work for you on network automation and don't understand anything about the network. That's fine. It works.
All right. So moving into some of the area of executive focus, Nico, as an operator, what are some of the challenges you see in the offerings in the marketplace today, whether it's from the vendors or other software developers, as you embark on this journey to continue to automate your network? What efforts would you be willing to champion to enable automation in the network?
That's a loaded question. I think the thing that's missing the most today, and the things that we can champion, is the data like structure, generally speaking, that we find across the different vendors. Because it's a nightmare. I mean, let's be clear, like from one vendor to another, things don't show the same. They look the same somehow, but it's never happening. And then API first type of approach, because yes, there is netconf, there is a bunch of things, but from one vendor to another, either it doesn't work, either it's not the same, or they claim being the same. But when you start working on it, I think that's being a problem. So I think that this is the two main things that I would champion.
Right.
And then after, I think one of the things that should be championed, and while there is ATF and like these kind of forums where like our NAF or NANOG, where you can exchange with people and try to build like form of consensus, I think we are lacking the consensus at the upper layers. Like building the software on the gears and maintaining that is one thing, but being able to operate across the board, I think that's the thing that is definitely missing. And what Jerome was saying on it takes a lot of time to maintain, I think that's part of the things that takes a lot of time and consume a lot of time to keep up with. I mean, we all know from one release to another, like if you upgrade your device, you might just hit like different bugs or change like that are not even mentioned into the documentation, generally speaking. So I think that that's the thing that I think that's very important to me is that. Other than that, after there is like other things that we can always like champion, I would say, like, and working closer from an industry perspective to define standards, but I think it's already done in some ways. And Jerome is right. I mean, things move at a pace. It's just difficult to keep up. By the time you implement something else, there is a new idea, and then things are moving and moving and moving. I'm not sure how we can get to the point where like things are normalizing if we need to build like upper layers and kind of agree to have like ways of like building up stuff. I think it's challenging overall, but I think that it's worth the shot and continuing the discussion across like experts in the industry. I think it's going to be key.
Yeah, data normalization definitely is one area that I feel.
Yeah,
is
like
a
I
big
mean,
pain
like
point.
just in the protocols. I mean, if you look at like a BGP on one vendor versus another vendor, like depending the way you turn the knobs, I mean, that's going to give you different results. Like even when things are crashing, they don't crash the same way. So I think at some point it's kind of the challenge is from the beginning to like the way you operate overall. Now there is ways to go against that, but I think that knowing that we are getting more and more in the software world, I think that that's where like people should probably spend more time on looking at those layers, like overall, just on telemetry. Like I mean, SNMP versus GNMI versus whatever. Like I mean. Like it's after like everyone likes their own flavor, and I think that's what makes it also difficult. Is that again there is different use case and different things to fix, but there is probably a common ground somewhere else that we can go and champion. So that's
sure. So Jerome, what is your North Star metric for an executive when it comes to optimization and network automation? Is it time to deployment, outage reduction, or something else entirely?
Definitely outage reduction. That's how we started at Cloudflare. The main reason we started network automation was to prevent outages, large-scale outages. Actually, the largest incident we had at Cloudflare, at least from my point of view, from a network point of view, is the one that happened in 2020, I think, where we had a large-scale backbone incident. We had a public blog post. We made the headlines and the news, everything. It was like absolutely dramatic. It happened because we didn't have network automation on that specific part of the config of the router. So we had an engineer who was like on call, had to quickly mitigate like a congestion somewhere. He applied the wrong routing policy in the wrong place, started attracting all the Anycast traffic into our single POP in Atlanta. It was absolutely dramatic. The reason he did that is not like you can't really blame the engineer of finger point, and the engineer is not at fault. Like he's trying to mitigate an active incident.
Right.
You blame the tooling. So I blame myself for not building that tooling at the time. That's really like the next follow-up from that incident was that, well, okay, and that's a part of the config that we absolutely need to put in network automation. So I would say probably each case is different. Like it really depends on the sensitivity of the company and how much margin you have to operate and all that. But in our case at Cloudflare, the main driver of network automation today is absolutely outage prevention. Provisioning, yeah, we do, of course, a lot of provisioning through network automation, but that's not it's never been the main driver. Like never. It will always be outage prevention. Especially when you operate with thousands of devices. One mistake in the config can cost you a lot.
Right. Yeah. But thank you for taking that leadership responsibility and saying, I'm responsible for this. But Chris, you advise many organizations. When a client tells you they're fully automated network, what is your first often overlooked area you audit to find where the process actually breaks down or reverts to manual intervention?
That's an interesting question. So I think some of the most common areas that get missed are There's a lot, actually. I mean, so first of all, very few people tell me that, and anyone who says that, I laugh. But taking your question, I think one of the places we tend to skip over is design. And now I'm not saying like you necessarily need like automation to do the design, but using automation to do the design, right? So if you're building network design documents that are actually understandable as code, where you can actually like use these as templates to then compare back against, right? So this is kind of where I think when we really talk about like intent-based networking, this is a part of what we're talking about is you have to be able to declare that intent in a programmatic form so that you can test back against it, right? How do I know that my network is actually in the state that I want it in? Well, I need to have that state documented in a way that's programmatic, right? And I'm talking around that in a weird way, but that's a big piece that I think is often missed. Another big one is people tend to jump to provisioning. As Jerome was saying, a lot of people think about provisioning as the key there. I think that troubleshooting is actually a much more rich area to start with automation, for one thing, because you can do read-only automation in troubleshooting. And also, we tend to spend, as network engineers anyway, in a lot of cases, we tend to spend more time doing troubleshooting. So there's a lot more, I think, fertile ground there. And then that often gets skipped over, where people are like trying to do provisioning or trying to do site builds or these kind of things, versus looking at what is that set of processes, what is that set of steps you do when there's an outage, or when there's, when somebody calls and complains that, their connection is slow. What do you do? Well, those steps, that data collection, that can be programmatized very, very easily, right? And it can give you back an answer, or at least give you the data that you needed really fast, instead of you spending, hours chasing down, who missed the VLAN on which switch, right? So I'll leave it there. Those two areas are really big, I think. I think having programmatic design and then also diving into troubleshooting and read-only automation is big areas that people tend to skip over.
Thanks for that advice. So finally, this is a question for all of you, starting with Jerome. If you could snap your fingers and instantly automate one thing, lingering manual process that still exists, what would that be?
That's a good question. Yeah. I don't know if that answers your question exactly, but I would say right now, I'm going to throw a buzzword, but right now I'm having good success with LLMs and network automation. If you think about it, a network configuration and a network topology is perfect for an analysis by an LLM. And right now, there's one thing that we're working on that is pretty good is you can ask natural questions to an LLM about your network, and it will actually be able to answer to you in a pretty reliable way, which definitely accelerate the time to troubleshooting that Chris was talking about. You could ask something like, hey, where is that IP address located in my network? What is it connected to? Does it have contention issue or packet loss issue? That type of stuff. And that thing will actually works pretty well if you know how to build it, but it's not that complicated. And I see a path where the tooling somehow goes into that direction today. It's a pretty good use case for LLMs.
All right. Nico?
No, I agree with Jerome. I think that's a good point. But in the current context where I'm in, I think that just getting right basic operations, just upgrades and pushing configs, config drifts. Well, it sounds easy, as you say. There is often things that are drifting, and God knows why things are drifting. I think that tackling that down with having the right set of data, the right data model and relationship between all the elements, so you can understand what's the status of your network in a snap of fingers. I think that's key. And that's I don't think it's a buzzword actually, all the LLM stuff. I think you're right. I think that's one of the things that we need to start inserting into our day-to-day, because it takes time, before you start building, ingesting all that data and starting getting a good result of what your network is actually looking like. Because after, when you at scale and 200 plus POPs, whatever the size of your network, the pressure on operators is getting real. I mean, if you do something else and things goes wrong, I mean, you need to be sure that you have the right thing at the moment where you need it. Otherwise, you have outages that last days sometimes. And I think that's what I would keep it to that, this morning. that were made.
Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I think not quite answering your question, maybe answering the one before again a little bit. I think the validation is a big piece of this, right? I think understanding how to do those pre and post checks, how to sandbox this stuff, right? Validation is a big thing. Definitely, if I had the magic wand, I think having deterministic answers from LLMs would be a fantastic jump forward for us in a lot of ways. If I could trust that LLM to answer correctly every time, it would be a very different world for sure.
Yeah, we're definitely working on that. It's like the time it takes to troubleshoot a problem on the network. Sometimes, when you think about it, it's kind of crazy. You have an alert usually that doesn't tell you much, about what's happening.
Yeah.
An alert that's saying, hey, that port is congesting. Okay, now you have to put in an engineer, has to run goes to a bunch of Grafana dashboards, look at some stats from NetFlow, and try to understand what's happening here. And there's a lot of thought process in that. That can certainly be automated, and we've automated a bunch of it. But I see a future where that stuff is actually so much more streamlined than it is today, and that's because we have all these advances in machine learning that we should absolutely leverage.
Yeah. All right. So at this point, I wanted to kind of open up the mics and have people ask any questions of the panelists, or me for that matter, but mostly the panelists. So I can't quite see with all the lights up here, but if anyone has any questions, feel free to come up to the mic. I see.
Hi, my name's Dave Plumford. I'm from PTX. I've been building large network automation for a long time, and all your experiences are very relatable. But I'm genuinely interested to hear what's your thoughts on the importance of productization when it comes to network automation. As it's clear, a lot of businesses' offerings change, positioning changes, and sales teams don't always get on the gravy train. So how can we as technical leaders and engineers support that business transition to continue network automation investments?
All right. Did anyone in particular want to take that question?
Are you asking about how do you prioritize in the company?
Yeah, so generally in the company, as you're automating the way the business and the services are being positioned, how do you get people on board internally for that so people can then consume those services? Because it's not a sell anymore over an email and a relationship. It's more on a portal and an API. And I think that's pretty important for continued investment into network automation to get that return.
That's pretty much the story I said before. At Cloudflare, the way we decided to invest in that is by saying, oh, you won't have to hire 20 more network engineers if we do that. Instead, you will have to hire 5 software engineers. So there's definitely a cost-saving function on the medium term, not on the short term for sure. The software engineers are actually more expensive than network engineers often. But that's the angle that I would use, which is kind of specific to a certain type of company like startups, probably. But yeah, another angle you can use depending on your business is definitely the compliance aspect of it. Banks and a lot of industries require it. So you say, well, I can complete your compliance program if I don't automate a bunch of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say, looking at key metrics and what business, your issues you're trying to solve, as a selling point somehow, because often it's while we are all probably swimming in that world on a daily basis. I mean, I think it sounds very foreign sometimes, like for other folks in the organization. And I think that's showing what good looks like and giving feedback based on what they relate to, right? I mean, if they're coming with a problematic and how do we address that, I think it's going to be easier to sell the points. Coming up with true data, I think being very clear about what good looks like and versus not, and the risk, if you don't do it, I think that's going to be probably enabling a lot of questions. But it's okay to have questions. At the end of the day, people are, I think, genuine when they come and just don't know. And I think that the more you answer it the most direct way with the right relevant data, I think it's kind of the first good step before you can get to get a, let's say, buy-in from other folks of the organization.
Yeah. I mean, so I think I'm just restating what both these guys have said, but why is this important to your business, and what are the metrics we can use to measure that, right? And it's going to be different, right? So that's kind of a non-answer, but it isn't, because that's what actually matters, right? So I think the main thing is understanding this is not a personal productivity tool. This is a business enabler. Okay. How does it enable the business? Let's measure that. Is it cost reduction? Is it additional services? Is it faster time to repair? Is it faster time to turn up a service? What's the metric that actually matters? And then not only do you need to be measuring that, but that should actually guide your automation efforts, right? That's where you should be building. Don't build the thing that you think is cool. Build the thing that actually is going to turn your manager's head, right?
Thank you.
Last question.
Yeah, this is a question more for Jérôme, but maybe for all of you guys. I'm pretty sure you all have a lot of suppliers and providers of network circuits, and you get a lot of maintenance notifications. And Jérôme, you talked about using AI and LLMs to help you troubleshooting stuff. Are you planning to use these tools to analyze all your email maintenances to tell you in advance, we could have this outage on the network because of these maintenances, and help you plan your automation to work around it? Are you working on stuff like that, or is it something that you are willing to work?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, because we actually started working on that just a month ago. Okay. We have a deluge of emails from our suppliers, providers about maintenance in any part of the world. I think we have 200s per day. Yeah. It's kind of crazy. And we have an active project right now to send these emails to an LLM that will do the parsing and inserts that into a maintenance calendar. That would be for the phase one. We're using actually using the Cloudflare offerings for that, Workers AI. So far, so good. I would say I think the main difficulty, which is always the difficulty with AI, is hallucinations and misunderstanding of what's contained in the email. But I think I'm pretty convinced that we will get there, and we'll have a pretty well-populated calendar anytime soon with that. Yeah.
Okay, so that's just a calendar to help you know exactly when things will happen. But I was also talking about these stuff helping you finding what will be the impact on your network, because you have different maintenances that can isolate a pop or something like that. So you may want the LN to correlate all of these. So is it something that you are also actively working on?
Yeah, you just have to do it by phase, like phase one, making sure that your calendar is actually well populated, doesn't contain a lot of mistakes. And then you have a phase two where you can connect this calendar of maintenances to the alerting system, see if it actually matches. And then you can have a phase three where we automatically disable a location or a transit or a peering based on this. But it's probably a long way still.
Yeah, maybe a presentation from Cloudflare in Nanog 100, maybe.
I hope so.
All right, thank you.
All right. Thank you. And I wanted to take this opportunity to thank my panelists, Jérôme, Nico, and Chris, for coming here and sharing their thoughts on the move towards automation.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.